All right, y'all. First and foremost, give all praise, honor, and glory to the Most High God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his son, the Mashiach, who some call Yahweh Shai, Yeshua, Yehoshua. We mostly know as Jesus Christ. Um, we're going to talk a little about Josephus today. You know, a lot of people bring up Josephus. Josephus said this, Josephus said that. We just gonna dig into who Josephus was and why his works are so important. He does have an extensive work with the antiquities of the Jews. It's like the audio, I got the audio book. The book is 50 plus hours. All right. If you got an audio book of the text, this is about 60 hours. Like it's an extensive work if you compare the two. It may be a little shorter than the Bible. Just the antiquities, and you got the Jewish wars, and I think I've one or two other writings that he had put out. But why is he so important? Why does his name always continue to come up? And like I said, we are going to glean from that audiobook from the Jewish the antiquities of the Jews, book 20. Chapter 2, and it goes into because we've been talking about the converts and the proselytes. Like he's important for one reason is that he lived in the first century. All right, he lived through some of the most important parts of Jewish history, of Christian history. With Christ, and living through that, listening through the beginning of the Messianic movement to 70 AD when things, and a little after. All right, he's documenting these things and documenting like the politics that went back and forth, the dealings with Hyrcanus and Mark Antony and Cleopatra. Just like I say, extensive stuff for us to deal with, that a lot of us are not dealing with. And if you do deal with it, and you're under that one West branch, and especially Israel only branch, it can be problematic. And this is what I'm telling y'all, you may want to leave that book alone. You may want to leave him alone. Once you start digging into that, it's gonna be problematic for you. And again, we'll give you that you can listen to about Queen Helena from the Parthians who converted. All right, the queen converted and her son converted to Judaism, and then he later becomes king. And how problematic that was politically and socially through that nation, being that their king is worshiping something else, is doing something else, and how they helped the Jews in 30 AD. All right, right when Christ is starting his ministry, they did something monumental where they have the queen, they've named streets after her, and they have the queen's body. If you go down there to the king's tomb in Jerusalem, they got the queen's body and all of this. Well, they got the queen's tomb, I guess, there on display in the museum or something like that. You can go look at. Anyway, Josephus in his works. All right, we're gonna read this again. If you want to get to that part about the audio clip, just go ahead and skip down. It'll probably be about the last 12 minutes of the video. The works of Josephus are considered extremely important as and this is AI. All right, this is just AI overview. All right. The works of Josephus are considered extremely important as they provide a primary source of information about the Jewish history, particularly during the first century CE, including the first Jewish-Roman War and other crucial contexts for understanding the world which Jesus lived. Okay, crucial evidence, crucial context, understanding the world which Jesus lived, or Yahweh Shai lived, making them a key resource for scholars studying the New Testament and Second Temple Judaism. Key points about Josephus's importance: eyewitness account. Josephus, Josephus lived through the events he describes, including the siege of Jerusalem, providing valuable firsthand accounts. Jewish perspective. His writings offer insight into Jewish customs, beliefs, and political situations from a Jewish perspective. All right. He also has a perspective on the Sabbath. If you was trying to figure that out. And how they were doing it in the first century. His works provide crucial background context for Jesus. His works provide crucial background information. Hold on. Background information about the social and religious landscape of the time when Jesus lived. Major works. His most notable writings include the Jewish War and the Antiquities of the Jews. Okay. That is that. Now, what I want to do here, media. No, I don't want to show the media. Display. Why is, oh, no. Okay. Boom, boom. We get that, make that small. And, all right, y'all. Let me share our screen here. Okay, Josephus, our primary source. It says this is a PBS website. Josephus, our primary source. The writings of the first century Jewish historian are critical for reconstructing the world of Judaism into which Jesus was born. One of the most important sources for all the history of this period is the Jewish historian Josephus. Josephus himself grew up in and around Jerusalem. He claims to have been a part of the Pharisaic group, but he was also obviously from a fairly prominent family. He's very important because he lived through and was actually part of the first revolt against Rome. After the revolt, he then went on to live in a lavish retirement at Rome itself, and there wrote the history of the Jewish War, and also another work called The Antiquities of the Jews, a long, extensive history of the Jewish people, from biblical days coming down to his own time. All right, Josephus wrote mostly at the end of the first century. I was talking about, you know, it's like that Antiquities. He's even breaking down, you know, from Genesis to Isaac, you know, to Exodus. You know, he's explaining the Old Testament pretty much. All right, he begins off explaining the Old Testament, giving like a oral and how they considered and how they were teaching it during that particular time. And that can be another reason why people would glean from it to see, especially when things are under, you know, we trying to get to the bottom of something, and one person sees it one way, somebody sees it another way, or you can go here and use a text like this and see, oh, okay, well they was saying this, and not that you have to go with it, just seeing their perspective during that particular time. From biblical days coming down to his own time. Josephus wrote mostly at the end of the first century, around the year 100, just a few years before and after. And so he gives us a perspective on the whole century of the development that had gone before, from the time of Herod the Great down to his own day, when these profound changes were taking place. And how reliable was he as an historian. Josephus as a historian is something of a puzzle sometimes. On the one hand, he's an eyewitness of many of these events, and in many cases, he's the only source we have for some very important events and stories. On the other hand, Josephus embellishes, as do most ancient historians. They tell the story. They create speeches for generals, even when they weren't there to hear them firsthand. And so sometimes we have to be careful with these ancient history writers like Josephus. Josephus is also interesting from another perspective because he clearly embellishes the stories from his own experience. Josephus himself had gone over to the Roman side at the end of the revolt. And so when we tell some of these stories, it's clear that he's also defending his position, defending his judgment and his change. All right. You know, Josephus switched sides. And in telling some of the stories, he's trying to, he tells in some of these stories in a way that defends his position. A lot of historians back in those ancient historians back in those times used to embellish and used to juice up the story a little bit and write in and say, well, he probably said it like this, when he was saying this, giving this great speech. Like we see in the movies like 300 and all of these, all of these ancient movies and these ancient battles, we always see the general giving some remarkable great speech, or the commander giving a speech. And you'll see here too that Josephus was a commander himself in Galilee. You get into it right here. It says Josephus was certainly among the most enigmatic personages in the history of the Jewish people. He wrote the Jewish War. He wrote the history of the Jewish people, and he was a commander of the Galilean forces of the army that opposed Rome for 2 years. He gave up those forces in a really traitorous event, and that makes him a very complex person, because after 68 he becomes the major spokesperson against persecuting the war with the Romans. And it is that change of attitude on his part that we can find parallel in other segments of the population that makes reading Josephus and understanding him so difficult. After the war, he winds up in Rome, sponsored by the Roman emperor, and he gets paid to write the rest of the history he didn't finish in Palestine. As historians of the ancient world, Josephus is our primary source for reconstructing history in the late Second Temple period and in the time of Jesus and the first century. Josephus is our Bible. He is our map. He is the guy we all turn to. And his complexity, his change of opinions on key ideas and key events of this time make him very difficult to take as a reliable source. Josephus winds up in Rome, sponsored by none other than Vespasian, the Roman emperor, and being paid to write the history of the Jewish people. And because of that, and because of his happy life that he lived out during his days in Rome, many people have distrusted his account of events. All right, because he was saved at the end by Rome, and I think this other next article we'll get it, because he was saved by Rome and paid to write this history for Rome and lived out a good life after he betrayed the Galileans and betrayed Israel and portrayed those that were for the war against against Rome. It's like it's hard to trust him. It's hard to trust him on some things. Because of that bias that he may have, because of how the Romans began to treat him and how they lifted him up and put him on high and laid it out for him. It says perhaps, all right, this is from Logos. It says perhaps it's best, it says while the works of Josephus is important, it's best to explore who Titus Flavius Josephus is first. He's a tough figure to classify. Was he a cultural aristocrat, a theologically minded Pharisee, a politician, an author, a historian? In Josephus, we find all of these things and more. Josephus was born into the Jewish priestly order of Jehoiarib, the first of the 24 priestly division organized by King David in 1 Chronicles 24. Growing up, Josephus surpassed his peers in his study of Jewish law. After studying under the Pharisees, the Essenes, and Sadducees, the three major religious fractions in the first century Jerusalem, he affiliated himself with the Pharisees. Even something like that can be puffed up. I was smarter than everybody in law. Excuse me, in law, and we went to study under the Pharisees, the Essenes, the Sadducees. I was the smartest person ever to come out of this thing, just pumped up. Why wouldn't he say that? But that is it true? Was he the smartest? you know. Jerusalem was a power keg with a constant disdain for Jewish ideas. Rome inflamed their already tense relationship with the Jews, being between liberal use of Roman soldiers against Jewish citizens and messianic Jewish factions who taught the world would be ending soon. And that's what I'm saying. That world, the end of the world was coming. You know, the end dates. That's what they were preaching. That's what they were preaching during the time of Christ. All right, so you got the messianic fractions saying this, and this is causing all kinds of tense. This is causing all kinds of problems. The Romans using soldiers against the citizens of Israel, and you know this new fraction of messianic, the apostles, going in. You know, Paul them going in. Say, man, this thing is over with. All right. Several factors were coming together to create the perfect climate for conflict. By the time Josephus had returned from a trip to Rome to negotiate with Nero for the release of imprisoned priests, his nation was in revolt. Despite speculatism about an uprising, Josephus took the post as a military leader in the region of Galilee. Not all of Galilee was supportive of the revolution, and insurgents hoped to use Josephus's birthright and successful negotiations with Rome as an inspiration to the hesitant Galileans. All right, and it's again showing you that you can pump yourself up. I'm a priest. I'm from the priestly line. I'm a Pharisee. I'm from the priestly line of Jehoiarib. He can use that to get people pumped up, like, yeah, we gonna fight with you. God gotta be on our side. We got a priest with us, and we finna go out here, you know, and fight against Rome. Josephus found himself fighting a defensive war against an overwhelming force while simultaneously trying to quell conflict within Jerusalem. Did Josephus support Rome? This is where Josephus' story takes a strange turn, and why many consider him an opportunist and a traitor. The Galilean city of Jotapata had fallen, and Josephus had found himself trapped in a cave with 40 other Jewish supporters. Fearing the worst and not wanting to fall into Roman hands, a suicide pact was decided upon them. They all agreed, standing in the circle. Each second man would kill the third. Josephus considered it the providence of God that he and one other man were the last living. He convinced his fellow soldier that they should give themselves over to the Romans. All right, and see, this is, you a coward, you a traitor. And I want to say, like, even sitting up there, you know, going down to the point when you should have just fell on your sword. But it's easy to say on this side of the fence, on this side of history. But you know, but who's there to tell that story? What happened to those? What really happened to those men? But according to him, you know, they decided to do a suicide pact. They decided to all commit suicide. Each man is gonna kill the other. All right, each man is gonna kill the next man next to him. And when it got round to him, he like, and it got down to the last two men. He like, hey, man, you know what? You know, it's probably not a good idea. Probably not a good idea. Let's go ahead and just turn ourselves in. You know, but this does sound like something that a joker would do, though. Many modern scholars accuse Josephus of orchestrating this outcome. In fact, the Josephus problem, all right, is this a term? This is a terminology. The Josephus problem is a computer. The Josephus problem is a theoretical problem related to a certain counting out the game. Oh, look at that. It done broke it down to the mathematics and computer science. All right. In computer science and mathematics, the Josephus problem. And this what I'm saying, this thing is so embedded in our history. We just seeing about trying to figure out about these folks. Man, this is embedded in they math and their history, and we have no idea. The Josephus problem. Why they call it that? They don't even know. Yeah. Because we saying it's a circle with Josephus in a circle with these folks, and this man killing this man, 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 and he's probably orchestrated this thing and put himself in a certain position, or you have to start it somewhere where it ends up being that y'all are the last two. The Josephus problem have become a mathematical problem where a person must decide where to stand in this circle in order to be the last one living. Josephus began to work for the Romans, giving them information on the insurgents. All right. Rome also put him to use trying to convince the rebels to surrender. Okay, so Rome is trying to, Rome is using Josephus. Josephus and the other jokers turn themselves in, and Rome is using him to talk to the rebels. All right, to the zealots. All right, to those that are rebelling against Rome, doing those wars. Jerusalem would not heed the warnings of this traitor. However, an agreement was never reached. Jerusalem would not heed to the warnings of this traitor, however, and an agreement was never reached. I did not listening to this joker. And then think about that. Also, is that he's writing about this stuff later, and he's also having him that I'm a traitor, and everybody knows I'm a traitor. Nobody is really, nobody really trusts me. Nobody respects me in Jerusalem. None of my people respect me. They feel I'm a traitor. And then he's writing out this history. So it can be, it can, what you have to understand is, when you're reading it. All right, he's not writing it for his people. He's writing it for Rome. He's writing it for his people too. You can say he's writing it for his people too, but this has been commissioned by Rome for him to document these things. And in some places, he's trying to save face for what he did. In 70 AD, Josephus was an eyewitness to the siege of Jerusalem. Rome destroyed the temple, and Jerusalem was sacked. According to Josephus, over 1 million people were killed during the siege, and another 97,000 were taken hostage. All right, taken hostage, and guess where they were took to? To Egypt, to mines in Egypt on ships, if according to Josephus. The death toll was high, and the loss of the total of the temple dwelt a destructive blow to both Jewish identity and their ability to rally. This is also in the them being taken to North Africa, taken to Egypt. I think it's also in Babylon and Timbuktu. If you keep on reading on that particular page that we have highlighted about Vespasian, putting these people in the that those black slaves were in the market. All right, the revolution was brought to a swift end. All right, when did Josephus write the histories? After becoming a Roman citizen, Josephus was commissioned by Caesar Vespasian to write an account of the Jewish revolt against Rome. Josephus finished the War of the Jews in 78 AD. By the year 93, Josephus had finished his second major work, The Antiquities of the Jews, a landmark history of the Jews from creation through the occupation of Palestine. In a later part of his life, he wrote Against Apion and his autobiography, The Life of Flavius Josephus. Flavius Josephus remains one of our best sources of first century history, as well as an essential resource of Old Testament textual criticism. All right, that's why I was talking about why, you can do textual criticism in the Old Testament, because he's breaking it down. He's breaking a lot of these things down with the Old Testament in his writings. You know, his writings may be more credible than some of these other writings that you're reading. Not only can you get the complete works of Josephus, all right, that was it for that, y'all. So what we'll do here, media source, I'll play this this play capture. We'll play this clip here from Josephus.
Chapter 2. How Helana, the queen of Adiabene, and her son Izates embraced the Jewish religion, and how Helana supplied the poor with corn when there was a great famine at Jerusalem.
Read that again. Hold on again now. This is book 20, chapter 2.
Chapter 2. How Helana, the queen of Adiabene, and her son Izates embraced the Jewish religion.
And Adiabene is somewhere like Mesopotamia kind of area. Mesopotamia, Babylon. When the group that end up calling themselves the Parthians or something like that from the 3rd century.
And how Helana supplied the poor with corn when there was a great famine at Jerusalem. 1. About this time it was that Helana, queen of Adiabene, and her son Izates changed their course of life and embraced the Jewish customs, and this on the occasion following. Monobazus, the king of Adiabene, who had also the name of Bazius, fell in love with his sister Helana, and took her to be his wife, and begat her with child. But as he was in bed with her one night, he laid his hand upon his wife's belly, and fell asleep, and seemed to hear a voice which bid him take his hand off his wife's belly, and not hurt the infant that was therein, which by God's providence would be safely born and have a happy end. This voice put him into disorder. So he awaked immediately and told the story to his wife, and when his son was born, he called him Izates. He had indeed Monobazus his elder brother by Helana also, as he had other sons by other wives besides. Yet did he openly place all his affections on this his only begotten son Izates, which was the origin of that envy which his other brethren, by the same father, bore to him. While on this account they hated him more and more, and were all under great affliction that their father should prefer Izates before them. Now, although their father was very sensible of these their passions, yet did he forgive.
And if you peep what they was just saying right there is that the other sons were jealous of the younger son, Izates, because the father loved him more than the other brothers. Almost familiar. It's almost similar to the story of Joseph.
As not indulging those passions out of an ill disposition, but out of a desire each of them had to be beloved by their father. However, he sent Izates with many presents to Abenarig, the king of Carax Spasini, and that out of the great dread he was in about him, lest he should come to some misfortune by the hatred his brethren bore him. And he committed his son's preservation to him. Upon which Abenarig gladly received the young man, and had a great affection for him, and married him to his own daughter, whose name was Samacha. He also bestowed a country upon him, from which he received large revenues. 2. But when Monobazus was grown old, and saw that he had but a little time to live, he had a mind to come to the sight of his son before he died. So he sent for him, and
so he had to send his son off because of the hatred of his brothers. Of his other sons, he was like, man, let me just send my favorite son off here and put him in charge of this and let this other brother take care of him, this other king take care of him, in which he allowed him to marry his daughter and gave him this great country. He made a lot of money off this country. And when this dude, Monobazus or whatever, when he gets of age, he says, you know what, let me go see my son for the last time. Let me go see what he's doing.
Embraced him after the most affectionate manner, and bestowed on him the country called Cara. It was a soil that bore amomum in great plenty. There are also in it the remains of that ark, wherein it is related that Noah escaped the deluge, and where they are still shown to such as are desirous to see them.
Now that sounded like he said it was also the land where Noah landed his ark, where the rest of the ark is. I don't know. That's what it sounded like. I don't know. Y'all hit the comments if that's what was being said there. Is that what Josephus is saying? And if that is does that seem like some embellishment? Or or have they used this as a source and tried to look for it and tried to scan where that ark may have landed, or where they finding fragments of it in this particular area? But let's continue.
Accordingly, Izates abode in that country until his father's death. But the very day that Monobazus died, Queen Helena sent for all the grandees and governors of the kingdom, and for those that had the armies committed to their command. And when they were come, she made the following speech to them. I believe you are not unacquainted that my husband was desirous Izates should succeed him in the government, and thought him worthy so to do. However, I wait your determination, for happy is he who receives the kingdom not from a single person only, but from the willing suffrages of a great many. This she said in order to try those that were invited, and to discover their sentiments. Upon the hearing of which, they first of all paid their homage to the queen, as their custom was, and then they said that they confirmed the king's determination, and would submit to it. And they rejoiced that Izates' father had preferred him before the rest of his brethren.
And like this, some Lord of the Rings. And again, this may be where they be gleaning this stuff from. But this, the queen is she made that speech just to see who she can trust, because she knows that everybody should know that the king wanted this. He had this favorite son, Izates, that he wanted to be ruler after him. Even to the point where he took him off and put him over there, and then spent his last days, going to see his son. So I just want to see if anybody else, if y'all jokers want to sit up there. She brought all the leadership, everybody who's governors and mayors, whatever, bring them up. Let me just see which one of you jokers is gonna try to, step in and take rulership and try to be a governor or something, and try to step in and try to take the king's place. Let me see, and then to the thinking about the culture of them paying homage to the queen first.
As being agreeable to all their wishes, but that they were desirous first of all to slay his brethren and kinsmen, that so the government might come securely to Izates, because if they were once destroyed, all that fear would be over which might arise from their hatred and envy to him. Helena replied to this that she returned them her thanks for their kindness to herself and to Izates, but desired that they would, however, defer the execution of this slaughter of Izates' brethren till he should be there himself, and give his approbation to it.
So all the brothers that that hate him so much, to keep them from trying to kill him, they like, well, no, those governors like, yeah, we know that Izates is his favorite. He wanted him to be king, and we suggest also that we kill them other brothers. So they won't even think about, so they won't even get the chance to try to take over. Why don't we just go ahead and kill all of them? And the queen like, nah, just hold on that until Izates come. And the king to come till he comes, and he can say if he wants to do that or not.
So since these men had not prevailed with her when they advised her to slay them, they exhorted her at least to keep them in bonds till he should come, and that for their own security. They also gave her counsel to set up someone whom she could put the greatest trust in, as a governor of the kingdom in the meantime. So Queen Helena complied with this counsel of theirs, and set up Monobazus, the eldest son, to be king, and put the diadem upon his head, and gave him his father's ring with its signet, as also the ornament which they call Sampsa, and exhorted him to administer the affairs of the kingdom till his brother should come, who came suddenly upon hearing that his
an ornament called Samson. And the governors gave them counsel, hey man, don't you lock up them brothers, until y'all figure that out. And then it seems that the closest person she could get to run the kingdom was the oldest son, and she put him, in the position temporarily, and took the counsel of those people.
His father was dead, and succeeded his brother Monobazus, who resigned up the government to him. 3. Now, during the time Izates abode at Carax Spasini, a certain Jewish merchant, whose name was Ananias, got among the women that belonged to the king, and taught them to worship God according to the Jewish religion. He, moreover, by them...
Hold on. What? Let's go back a little bit.
Merchant, whose name was Ananias, got among the...
There was a merchant whose name was Ananias. We been getting money.
Up the government to him. 3. Now, during the time Izates abode at Carax Spasini, a certain Jewish merchant, whose name was Ananias, got among the women that belonged to the king, and taught them to worship God according to the Jewish religion.
So, Ananias, this Jewish merchant, got among the women and taught the women how to worship God, the one true God. Readers, listen again.
Merchant, whose name was Ananias, got among the women that belonged to the king, and taught them to worship God according to the Jewish religion.
He knew how to get to them. And so they just out there teaching the women. They out there teaching anybody, trying to Judaize anybody, trying to convert anybody. So he over there converting these women that belong to the king.
He, moreover, by their means became known to Izates, and persuaded him in like manner to embrace that religion.
And the women persuaded Izates, the king of the Parthians, to convert to this religion.
He also, at the earnest entreaty of Izates, accompanied him when he was sent for by his father to come to Adiabene. It also happened that Helana, about the same time, was instructed by a certain other Jew, and went over to them. But when Izates had taken the kingdom and was come to Adiabene, and there saw his brethren and other kinsmen in bonds, he was displeased at it. And as he thought it an instance of impiety, either to slay or imprison them, but still thought it a hazardous thing for to let them have their liberty, with the remembrance of the injuries that had been offered them, he sent some of them and their children for hostages to Rome, to Claudius Caesar. And so,
So he comes back, he sees his brothers, he finds out his brothers is locked up. He like, that ain't cool to have them locked up like that. But at the same time, we just can't have them running free. I know the animosity they have towards me. So he like, man, we gonna sell them to Rome, sell them to Caesar.
sent the others to Artabanus, the king of Parthia, with the like intentions. 4. And when he perceived that his mother was highly pleased with the Jewish customs, he made haste to change, and to embrace them entirely. And as he supposed that he could not be thoroughly a Jew unless he was circumcised, he was ready to have it done. But when his mother understood what he was about, she endeavored to hinder him from doing it, and said to him that this thing would bring him into danger, and that as he was a king, he would thereby bring himself into great odium among his subjects, when they should understand that he was so fond of rites that were to them strange and foreign, and that they would never bear to be ruled over by a Jew.
They will never be ruled over by a Jew. You done converted to Judaism, they'll never be ruled over by a
and
Jew.
that as he was a king, he would thereby bring himself into great odium among his subjects, when they should understand that he was so fond of rites that were to them strange and foreign, and that they would never bear to be ruled over by a Jew. This it was that she said to him, and for the present persuaded him to forbear. And when he had related what she had said to Ananias, he confirmed what his mother had said. And when he had also...
And the Jewish merchant, Ananias, when he goes back to Ananias, said, man, listen, man, I can't convert to this thing. Like, if they find out, if my subjects, people I rule over, they find out that I'm doing it, it's gonna be problematic. It's gonna be problematic for the kingdom, man. And the merchant also said, the Jewish merchant said, you know what, you're right.
Threatened to leave him unless he complied with him. He went away from him.
Oh, he said forbear. Let me see.
Unless he complied with him, the present persuaded him to forbear. And when
He persuaded him to forbear.
he would thereby bring himself into great odium among his subjects, when they should understand that he was so fond of rights that were to them strange and foreign, and that they would never bear to be ruled over by a Jew. This it was that she said to him, and for the present persuaded him to forbear.
Yeah.
And when he had related what she had said to Ananias, he confirmed what his mother had said. And when he had also threatened to leave him unless he complied with him, he went away from him and said that he was afraid lest such an action being once become public to all, he should himself be in danger of punishment for having been the occasion of it, and having been the king's instructor in actions that were of ill reputation. And he said,
And I was like, I don't even want to be here for that. You know, if that's what you're going to do, let me get up out of here, because they're going to end up blaming me and want my head.
that he might worship God without being circumcised, even though he did resolve to follow the Jewish law.
Very important here. Let me just let this thing play.
He should himself be in danger of punishment for having been the occasion of it, and having been the king's instructor in actions that were of ill reputation. And he said that he might worship God without being circumcised, even though he did resolve to follow the Jewish law entirely, which worship of God was of a superior nature to circumcision. He added that God would forgive him, though he did not perform the operation while it was omitted out of necessity and for fear of his subjects. So the king at that time complied with these persuasions of Ananias. But afterwards, as he had not quite left off his desire of doing this thing, a certain other Jew that came out of Galilee, whose name was Eleazar, and who was esteemed very skillful in the learning of his country, persuaded him to do the thing. For as he entered into his palace,
So you had one Jewish merchant tell him, hey, you know what, man, God will forgive you. You know, it's a little heat on you about converting to this thing. So, you know, I don't want these folks to, you know, to cause you into trouble and, you know, but the most important thing is that you only worship this God, all right? That you only worship Yahweh or Yahweh, Yahweh. You only worship the Lord of Israel, the God of Israel. And then you got another brother coming in from Galilee named Eleazar, another Jewish brother coming in saying, hey, you know what? Nah, you got to get circumcised. And again, we see this in the text. All right, we see this in the text. This is 30 CE. When did the Jerusalem Council happen? All right. 30 CE, Christ just started his ministry. So, you know, the Jerusalem Council has to be, you know, a couple decades later. A decade? Yeah. Maybe a few decades later.
to salute him, and found him reading the law of Moses, he said to him, Thou dost not consider, O king, that thou unjustly breakest the principle of those laws, and art injurious to God himself by omitting to be circumcised. For thou oughtest not only to read them, but chiefly to practice what they enjoin thee. How long wilt thou continue uncircumcised? But if thou hast not yet read the law about circumcision, and dost not know how great impiety thou art guilty of by neglecting it, read it now. When the king had heard what he said, he delayed the thing no longer, but retired to another room and sent for a surgeon, and did what he was commanded to do. He then sent for his mother and Ananias his tutor, and informed them that he had done the thing, upon which they were presently struck with astonishment and fear, and that to a great degree, lest the thing should be openly discovered and censured, and the king should hazard the loss of his kingdom, while his subjects would not bear to be governed by a man who was so zealous in another religion, and lest they should themselves run some hazard, because they would be supposed the occasion of his so doing. But it was God himself who hindered what they feared from taking effect, for he preserved both Izates himself and his sons when they fell into many dangers, and procured their deliverance when it seemed to be impossible, and demonstrated thereby that the fruit of piety does not perish as to those that have regard to him, and fix their faith upon him only. But these events we shall relate hereafter. 5. But as to Helena, the king's mother, when she saw that
And basically, he got many testimonies of how God did deliver Izates. All right, so it didn't really come to pass. It didn't really become a big deal what he did, because he was always he was always delivered as seeing the benefits and the fruits of that. And later within the text, he'll get into some of the things that were actually happening.
the affairs of Izates' kingdom were in peace, and that her son was a happy man, and admired among all men, and even among foreigners by the means of God's providence over him, she had a mind to go to the city of Jerusalem, in order to worship at that temple of God, which was so very famous among all men, and to offer her thank offerings there. So she desired her son to give her leave to go thither, upon which he gave his consent to what she desired very willingly, and made great preparations for her dismission, and gave her a great deal of money, and she went down to the city Jerusalem, her son conducting her on her journey a great way. Now her coming was of very great advantage to the people of Jerusalem, for whereas a famine did oppress them at that time, and many people died for want of what was necessary to procure food withal, Queen Helena sent some of her servants to Alexandria with money to buy a great quantity of corn, and others of them to Cyprus to bring a cargo of dried figs. And as soon as they were come back and had brought those provisions, which was done very quickly, she distributed food to those that were in want of it, and left a most excellent memorial behind her of this benefaction.
So the queen, because of the great benefits and she's seeing God working and moving, with her son, she wanted to give a thanks offering down in Jerusalem. And at the particular time, Jerusalem was going through a great famine. She stopped at Alexandria, Egypt, got a whole bunch of corn, whole bunch of dry figs, and brought them down to Jerusalem to feed the people. We also see Paul doing a collection for a great famine that Israel was going through, collecting it from Gentiles and bringing it to Jerusalem, to the church of Jerusalem to feed the people.
She bestowed on our whole nation. And when her son Izates was informed of this famine, he sent great sums of money to the principal men in Jerusalem. However, what favors this queen and king conferred upon our city Jerusalem shall be further related hereafter. Chapter 3.
And he also sent a whole bunch of money down there to Jerusalem. All right, this convert. So shout out to the merchant Ananias and that Galilean Eleazar, and he was right before the Jerusalem Council of Acts, before Acts 15. He did exactly what they was always doing, just like we've seen. If you've seen the videos that we've been doing, and what sparked this was the bishop, the apostle Elder Tahar, using Josephus to say that we conquered to prove that we conquered the Edomites and forced them into and converted them into Judaism, and forced them to get circumcised in 2nd century, 1st century BC, and we still see that here, even 1st century, before the Jerusalem Council, we still see this Galilean who was renowned and very scholarly in the word, going to the king and telling him, hey man, you're converted to this thing, but you got to get circumcised, man. And listen, I'll show you the text right here. I'll show it to you where this is what you need to do. This is what you need to do to come into this thing. He's not telling that king, hey, this thing ain't for you. This ain't what you supposed to. This God is only the God of Israel. You're not telling them that. Yeah, this is what you need to do. And in that we see, you see what them helping Israel, giving them, during that time of the famine, and all of this stuff was lined up. All of this stuff is the Most High moving. All right, so they bring in corn, they bring in figs, they bringing in money, and this story ends up continuing. This is kind of like the end of the book. It's like maybe an hour left in the book. This is later in that text, but this is the kind of information is in there. All right, and so you can look at it, glean from it, and you can kind of see certain things. You can see the political climate. You don't have to guess. You don't have to speculate as much, especially when some of these things and these ideologies are lining up with the text. Especially when we see the same problems within the text. When people, the Pharisees coming up saying, no, they got to get circumcised. They got to get circumcised. That's the law of Moses. They got to keep the law of Moses. They got to get circumcised. Here it is right here. What you mean? They just can't come in and just believe God. No. You need to get circumcised. And this is the same thing he's telling this convert here. Pray this thing was edifying. Y'all be blessed. We'll see y'all on the next one. Shalom.